They are straight up, hardcore, in the boardroom executives. Ambitious, totally disciplined, and goal-oriented. If there is anyone who is more controlling than a Scorpio and more micromanaging than a Virgo, it would be a Mars and Capricorn leader. Hello, thanks for joining me. This is another episode of Beyond the Zodiac, and we are here for our boss, AstroBiz Coffee Talk. Today, we're going to be talking about Mars and the power of Mars in business. Now, in general astrology, Mars is the planet of action, motivation, and assertiveness. But why is Mars relevant in business? Well, I don't know. It might just be our drive, our ambition, and our leadership style. If you're also doing forecasting for the markets and things of that nature, Mars can also represent the commodity. What are we fighting for? And we're also going to look at Mars retrograde in Cancer later this year and some of the implications that it can have for you and your business. And now, what does Mars do? What does it do really? Mars is the engine of motivation. It is what drives you. It's your own personal drive and your passions, as it does rule Aries and Scorpio. So there is a lot of drive, passion, entrepreneurial spirit, and just wanting to plow forward. It's our own inner warrior. It's where we take a stand, and it's also what we're fighting for. It influences our desire to take initiative and push us through challenges. It can do that either by a strong placement in your natal chart, or it can also do it by transit. So you can have a Mars trine to your ascendant or your sun that will give you that extra push of energy. On the opposite side of that, you can also have a Mars square, and that can challenge you to meet deadlines. So transits definitely work in your favor with Mars. Some really strong Mars placements that I look at when I look at a business chart, when somebody is like, oh, I think I want to start a business. I think I want to go into business for myself. I don't want to work for anybody anymore. I can't do this. Can I be an entrepreneur? Yes, I definitely think anybody can, as long as you put your Mars to it. But there are definitely some placements in your natal chart which have a really, 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 really powerful impact. If you have a Mars in the first house of your identity, it is kind of like having a Mars in Aries. So Mars in Aries is going to be very aggressive, go for it. Even innovative and willing to take those calculated risks. Mars in the second house of your earned income means that you are driven by that money, honey. You are making it. You are all hustle and flow. If you have Mars in your eighth house, that's an interesting position, because that, to me, in business is your assets, equities, and other people's money. So you might be driven, really get those assets, equities, lay it down, buy that house, get those rental properties. And then also, if you have Mars sitting at the top of your chart in the 10th house, close to your midheaven, in conjunction with your midheaven, or just in your 10th house in general, that is your career house. That means that you are a warrior. You are a fighter, and you are willing to do whatever you can, get yourself into the public eye. Because the 10th house, remember, above all other things, is the public sphere. It's on the opposite side of the 4th house, which is our home, our ancestry. The 10th house is our public sphere, and it's where we have our career, our impact. What legacy are we going to leave? That is all 10th house. So Mars gives you assertiveness, and it helps you in your decision making and conflict resolution by not only giving you what you're fighting for, but it also gives you a clear and defined line in the sand. If you are in a negotiation relying on your Mars and looking at what sign your Mars is in is going to tell you where your boundary is. This is what I'm fighting for. That's it. This is as far as I'm going in this contract, in this negotiation. This is Mars will also tell you sometimes your limitations, and it will tell you where you stop. It will tell you when to stop fighting as much as it kicks your butt forward to fight some more. So, in essence, it does help you make bold decisions because you know where your bottom line is and you also know where your top line is. And with that knowledge, you can take charge of any business situation, any negotiation, or in sales, it's also really helpful. There are certain Mars placements that are a little bit better for sales, like a Mars in Gemini, because you are driven to make that connection. And with that connection, you will bring out the sales. And so those are some things you look at. We're going to look at the signs in a little bit, Mars through the signs, because that also tells you what your leadership style is. When I look to see what kind of a leader you are going to be, one of the first planets I look at is your Mars, because that is your warrior, your general, if you will. So that is how you are going to lead the charge in any business situation. So it's going to give you that competitive edge because it helps you thrive under pressure, and it also helps you set your goals. So you can also use the assertive energy of Mars to stay ahead because you can challenge yourself. Mars is the planet that will challenge you and will challenge you to win. So it keeps you in that competitive business environment. If you lean very, very comfortably into that Mars and just let it run amok, you are going to stay. Knowing yourself and knowing what your strengths are is one of the greatest tools that you can have, not only in your business, but also in your life in general. So Mars can help you in your life, but especially in business, Mars is definitely the commodity you're fighting for. So we're going to go through each of the signs and we're going to look at Mars as a leadership. This is your style of leadership. Every style of leadership has a set of strengths, and every style of leadership has a set of weaknesses. We're going to look at them all right now. So first of all, Mars in Aries. Mars in Aries is known as the trailblazer because it is direct, bold, and fast-paced. A Mars and Aries leader is quick to take initiative and are highly action-oriented. Mars and Aries is a very entrepreneurial sign, very entrepreneurial placement for a Mars because you don't want to work for anybody else. You don't want to work for anybody else. You don't want anybody else to do it for you. You're going to do it yourself. The strength is, you have that dynamic leadership style and you thrive on challenges and innovation. You are going to do it first. I'm going to be first. I'm going to get to the finish line. I will be first. That is the competitive nature of a Mars and Aries. So it is always winning the race. It will be faster. It will be stronger, as does rule Aries. So this is Mars at its fullest, most glorious potential. Not without its challenges, though. Mars in this position can be incredibly impulsive and sometimes doesn't know when to stop, and sometimes will leap without thinking about the long-term consequences. Mars in this position can be equally as challenging if you have something close to it like Neptune, if it's in conversation with Neptune or if it's in conversation with Jupiter, you may take on too much. You may be overly ambitious. You may not know when to stop. Mars in Aries is also very prone to burnout. So this is one thing that you have to temper by paying attention to the timing. The universe is all about timing, right? Use those Neptune transits and use those retrograde periods to rest, recharge, and refuel. Mars in Taurus. Mars is actually in detriment in Taurus. I know you wouldn't think that it would be, but it is. Mars is in detriment in both of the Venus ruled signs, right? Because the ancient rulership of Mars is Scorpio. Mars rules Scorpio according to ancient astrology. And so in ancient astrology, one of the detriments is also Taurus. Mars in Taurus, whilst we refer to that as the steady builder, slow and steady wins the race. Mars in Taurus can be really, really slow. It's known for its patient, determined, and focus. And, it focuses on stability and it focuses on slow movement forward. It is the tortoise. In the story, the tortoise and the hare, Mars in Taurus is the tortoise because it takes a lot to get Mars in Taurus to move. Once Mars in Taurus is in movement and in motion, in forward motion, it's very hard to get them to stop. But it's darn near impossible to get them to start unless they want to do it themselves. There has to be some motivational thing at the end. There is some carrot that you are dangling at the end. And Mars in Taurus will get up and slowly move forward. They build businesses very slowly, but very surely. And they are incredibly consistent. As a matter of fact, that is their strong suit, is that once they are in motion, they are consistently in motion. And they are very reliable leadership because Taurus is a very stable sign. It's a fixed earth sign, so you're going to be committed to long-term success. You are not looking for the immediate gratification of a Mars in Aries. You are looking for the long-term prognosis, and that is your key to success. However, have you ever tried to move a Taurus? Have you ever tried to get a Taurus to do anything? They can be incredibly stubborn. Fixed earth is probably one of the most stubborn positions that there is. It is one of the biggest challenges is that they oftentimes will resist change and they will struggle with adapting to fast-paced environments. And so they have the sense of, I am doing it one step at a time. And they can be very methodical and they can be very thought out and they can be willing to put the work into it. They can be willing to be grassroots with it. That's what a Mars in Taurus will do. But they have to make up the mind to do it themselves. Otherwise, they're incredibly stubborn, stuck in the mud, and sometimes stick to old and outdated ideologies. They don't have that sense of innovation that a Mars in Aries would have, or perhaps a Mars in Aquarius would have. They have tried and true. This is the tried and true method for doing this, so therefore I'm going to do it. So that is one of the biggest challenges, that sometimes you have to rely on transits, you have to rely on other Mars transits to activate that. And you also have to rely on transits that are innovative or force you into innovation. So a Mars square Mars would be a good example of that, or Mars square Uranus would be a good example of that. Those are challenges that force you into innovation. They force you to make the change. As stubborn as you are, you need to change in order to grow. And that sometimes can be the sticking point with the Mars in Taurus. Now, Mars in Gemini, that's the communicator. Totally the communicator. Also, placements like Mars in Gemini, Gemini rising, that's the salesperson. They are versatile, they're curious, they're adaptive, and they totally excel at multitasking, intellectual pursuits, and relationship management, not establishment, relationship management. So a Mars in Gemini is going to be great at networking. They can connect with people. They can bridge the gap. They can communicate ideas, and they can handle multiple projects at one time. They're all over the place. Mars in Gemini has a lot of energy and always is going and is always talking and is really going to lead by networking, communicating, and delegating. Oftentimes, you'll find Mars in Gemini trying to do everything and trying to be in every single project that they're involved in, but you will find a highly developed Mars in Gemini delegating. They have multiple projects. They're managing multiple projects. They're not doing multiple projects themselves. So some of the biggest challenges for Mars and Gemini is that they can be incredibly scattered, and they can also be easily distracted without clear direction. This Mars in Gemini, if you give it an idea, it will go. If you create a plan, it will execute it, but it needs clear direction. So if you yourself are an entrepreneur or a business owner or a manager or a leader with a Mars in Gemini, you can be an incredible idea person. You can be an incredible visionary. You can be an incredible thought producing machine. The key for you is to grow the team around you, to ground you. You need to ground yourself, and you need to ground yourself with people who are not only earthy, but fiery. Because you can spit out ideas left and right. You need people to enact those ideas. Surround yourself with Virgos. No joke. There is a reason why both Virgo and Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So Mercury ruled Mars is going to be great in one of two areas: gathering and networking, Gemini; breaking down, organizing, and executing, Virgo. Surround yourself with Virgos. And also surround yourself with Scorpios. So Geminis are great at pumping out ideas, and Scorpios are great at doing the research. Also a Mars-ruled sign. So you need the clear direction in order to execute plans effectively. So the key for you is networking and creating that team so that you can spit out the ideas and your team will take over from there. You can manage teams, but when it comes to managing yourself in multiple projects, you all over the place. You a mess. Get it together, Mars and Gemini. So Mars in Cancer is the nurturer. You have a very nurturing leadership style. You're emotionally driven. You're protective and you're intuitive. You lead through empathy. Mars in Cancer, I would describe as one of the ultimate servant leaders. You lead through empathy and nurturing your team. You're the coach. You're the support. You are just everyone's mom. You know, you're bringing muffins. It's a Saturday. You're slammed. You're going to go and get bagels for everyone because you know that by being empathetic and understanding and supportive and emotionally connected to your team, you know that they will perform better. Your strength is compassion. And compassionate leadership that fosters loyalty and team cohesion. So you can foster and build an amazing team that will do anything for you, and a team that works very well together. Now, Mars in Cancer is going to have that intuition and that second sense when it comes to people. So any of the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, are going to have that intuition naturally. That is a natural faculty that a water sign has. It has a greater sense of intuition than a lot of other signs. So you will be able to intuitively build a team and foster that connection with them. You will oftentimes be emotionally connected to your team, and you'll oftentimes be emotionally connected to your job. You know, like they say, home is where the heart is. Why am I saying home? Because Mars in Cancer is real estate. It's home. It's finding that place of security and cohesion and togetherness. It's your biggest strength, but it can also be your biggest challenge because you can struggle with emotional decision making and you can also struggle with taking business decisions personally. It's not personal, it's just business. But you, Mars in Cancer, as that is totally the fall of Mars, Mars falls in the sign of Cancer, which means that sometimes you run forward, emotionally making those decisions, and you trip yourself up. And you sometimes get caught into the personal, interconnected, heart-centered nature of things. Business is not heart-centered. And that is sometimes where you fall. You make decisions based off of your heart, not necessarily looking at the numbers, the logic, the figures, the projections. Those emotional decisions sometimes can be your downfall because you act impulsively. When you get an emotional connection, attachment, or feeling about something, that's the direction you run in. Not always the best one, because sometimes there's no substantiation to that decision. So a Mars in Cancer really needs to focus on not making the emotional decisions and taking a step back and bringing it to the team. Bring those decisions to your team because they are your voice of reason. That loyal team that you built through your superpower of nurturing and compassion is now going to ground you. Mars in Leo is a visionary leader, totally charismatic, confident, and passionate in everything they do. You know a Mars in Leo because it's Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is like what I use to describe a Mars in Leo all the time. They are so passionate and they take the spotlight. They get up on stage and they inspire you. They will be the one that stands on that stage at the shareholder meeting and will have you in tears. They will have you believe that you can do anything. Creative leadership that motivates others and brings enthusiasm and vision. You are going to stand up on stage and you are going to do breathing exercises until that vision becomes a reality. It's the truth. That is the total truth with a Mars in Leo. Now, Mars at 17 degrees of Leo has a little bit of a boost. So really take into account that if you have a Mars that's at 17 degrees of Leo, there is a slight exaltation there. And so you will be a little bit more over boisterous and may need something to balance you out and temper you. Your biggest challenge is your pride. You think that you are impervious to everything. You are above the vicissitudes of business. You are above a crashing market. You are above. You will go down with the ship. And you are also overly focused on personal recognition. You don't do anything unless you get the accolades, unless you get the applause, and unless people are bowing down at your feet. Mars and Leo can have a little bit of a God complex as a leader. So they also need to inspire people who will check them and inspire people who will ground them because you want to be seen, heard, and you want the message to ring out across the land like bells. But you sometimes speak too quickly and you sometimes have an enthusiasm that speaks before it should. So you can be the visionary. You can be that person on stage, but you need to make sure that behind you, you have a supportive team that scripts you. Because sometimes you say too much, you reveal secrets. The sun is the great illuminator, and as the sun rules Leo, it will illuminate secrets. You will divulge information that you don't necessarily need to. So that can be a challenge for a Mars and Leo leader. Moving on to Mars and Virgo. I love a good Mars and Virgo. You want to know why? Because I have one. My Mars is in Virgo, and I am the strategist. Analytical, detail-oriented, and service-focused. Mars and Virgo leaders excel in organization and efficiency. Yes. If you look around my office, you will see nothing but lists and productivity matrices. You will see filing systems, and you will see organized chaos. Well, actually, really, it's just organized. It's not really chaotic, but it is organized. You will see things in the most efficient place possible. Everything I need is within arm's reach. Filing cabinet on this side, books, ephemeris on this side, and it is all within arm's reach. So the strength of a Virgo and the strength of a Mars in Virgo as a leader is that you have a practical leadership style that ensures everything runs smoothly. Oh yes, you have your own inner built-in system of checks and balances. Oh yes, you do. Oh yes. However, that can also be one of your downfalls. Mars and Virgo can be extremely overly critical and focus too much on the small details. Yes, this is my 4th time recording this podcast. No joke. Mars and Virgo can be too focused on the minutia and can be a micromanager. Very much so a micromanager. Especially if you have a placement like myself, Mars conjunct Jupiter. You will also make mountains out of molehills. So, Mars and Virgo. Mars and Virgo will literally run the world, but it will try and have its hands in everything. So the challenge for a Mars and Virgo leader is to take a step back and manage the managers. Don't micromanage the small people. Manage the managers. You need to be able to step back and say, I will give you the system, but I'm not going to do it for you. Because a Virgo, that's the hardest thing for anyone with a lot of Virgo placements or a lot of Virgo signatures in their chart, like Virgo rising or stellium in Virgo. It is the hardest thing to give the system and expect somebody to do it. Because you're like, no, I created this. I can do it better. I created the system. I will finish this myself. Mars and Virgo leaders, that will be your downfall. Your biggest challenge as a leader with a Mars and Virgo, you need to know when to take a step back and when to trust the process and when to trust your team. Because you do not trust anyone. That is something that you should know about a Virgo, is that Virgos may seem trusting, but they're not. They are analyzing 85 different ways on how you might do something, how you might go sideways, they are planners. And they always plan for the worst case scenario. So they are your crisis people. So you thrive in a crisis. You thrive when the world is literally, up in flames. That's when a Mars in Virgo thrives. You thrive in the chaos because you're driven to bring organization to that chaos. But sometimes the tiny details are what stop you up. They're what stop the process because you're like, oh no, the stitch is out of alignment. I need to fix it. You don't put it to rest. Mars in Libra. Moving on. Mars in Libra. Oh, Mars in Libra. Mars is in detriment in Libra. These are uncomfortable positions for Mars. The reason why Mars is in detriment in Libra is because Libra is Venus ruled. Mars and Venus have a love-hate relationship. They love to be together, but planets do not love. to be in each other's signs. Mars in Libra is the diplomat. They can be balanced, they can be cooperative, and they can be team-oriented. Mars in Libra leaders have a focus on harmony and fairness in their decision-making process. Their strengths are in collaborative leadership, and they value input from others, and they like to build partnerships. Sometimes a Mars in Libra doesn't know what it's fighting for, because Mars in Libra will actively fight to compromise and will oftentimes compromise their own values for someone else for the sake of maintaining balance. Their biggest challenge is struggling with indecision. Have you ever been friends with a Libra and asked them what they want for dinner? Well, Mars in Libra as a leader is going to do the same thing. Well, I don't know. What do you think? Well, I don't know. This is what I think, but what do you think? No, I mean, how do you feel about it? You struggle with taking charge and stepping into authority, and you have the tendency to avoid confrontation. In order to maintain balance, sometimes you avoid confrontation at all costs. At all costs. And that does not move forward. Nothing moves forward, because if you stay in a state of constant compromise and yield to somebody else's whims, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to move forward. So your biggest challenge as a leader, making up your mind, because the right thing isn't going to come to you. You have to use that Martian energy and fight for it. But Mars in Libra doesn't want to fight. I'll just wait here until things settle down. I'm going to wait here until the right thing comes to me. I don't know what I want to do with that. Sounds like a really great idea, but let's think about some other ideas. What do you think about that? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. That is Mars in Libra to a T. To a T. And Mars in Libra as a leader may not have the strength they have the strength to build relationships. They have the strength to build partnerships, but they may not have the strength to do it on their own. So the trick with a Mars in Libra is they need to find a partnership. They thrive in partnerships. They don't thrive doing it on their own. They need partnerships, or they need a team. And sometimes that team only needs to be one or two other people, preferably just one other. Libra is the sign of balance. So Libras function great in partnership. Mars in Libra as a leader works well as a co-leader, because then they have someone to bounce ideas off of. They have someone who will actually make the decision, whereas they will kind of sit not. They'll kind of sit and just compromise. Mars in Libra as a leader is going to need someone to make the decision. So that's why they function really well in partnerships. Mars in Scorpio. This is a fun one. This is a really, really fun one. Mars, which is the ancient ruler of Scorpio, is the powerhouse leader. Powerhouse. This is the emperor. Ta-da! You think it's the Mars in Aries, but no, it is the Mars in Scorpio. This is Napoleon. Napoleon Bonaparte is for certain, the embodiment of a Mars in Scorpio energy. They are intense, incredibly strategic, and transformative. Mars and Scorpio leaders thrive in high-pressure situations and drive change. They don't go with change. They make the change, decide on the change, and drive it. Scorpio is a fixed water sign, and one of Scorpio's superpowers is transformation. They see a situation, and they will transform it. Think of the sting of a scorpion. They see a situation, they sting it, and it dies, goes through transformation. They drive change. These are change makers. These are people you want in high power positions. You want these people to drive change because number one, not driven by ego. They're driven by intuition. They're driven by their heart. They're a water sign. They have that incredible sense of intuition. They have an inner knowing of what's right. And number two, they're not megalomaniacal. They're not wanting recognition. They don't outwardly seek recognition. They're not prideful. They're not up on stage. They don't need to be up on stage because they just exude leadership. They walk into a room and you just kind of look at them. They have a very, very strange, very powerful energy about them. Their strength is focused leadership that is determined and resilient through all changes. They are also planners. They plan for challenges. They will see through. They will see situations through to the end because they want to take something and they want to make it better. They want the transformation, which is why the modern rulership of Scorpio is Pluto. It is about transformation. What needs to break down in order to be rebuilt? What needs to be burned so that Phoenix can rise? That is a Mars and Scorpio leader right there. Their one challenge is that they can be very controlling and incredibly secretive. They work behind the scenes. You might not know what they're doing. You might develop a sense of not trusting them. But when they come out of that boardroom or when they come out of their office, you know they're going to have their hands all over it. And they're going to dictate what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to happen. They can be a little bit more of the dictator. They don't necessarily have the God complex, but they definitely rule with an iron fist. So as a leader, it's important to take a step back as a Mars and Scorpio. Be the change maker, but don't be controlling. Don't be rigid. As Scorpio is another fixed sign, there is always going to be that sense of rigidity. There's always going to be that sense of stubbornness. I do this better. My way is right. Your way is not right. My way's right. So you have to learn to be less controlling. Relinquish control and sometimes surrender to the plan. Surrender to the plan. Surrender to the needs of others. Because you'll end up getting it in the long run. Also, Mars and Scorpio as a leader is not trusting. Not trusting at all. They oftentimes will sting first and ask questions later. So they definitely need a strong support system to prevent them from making those decisions. Moving along to Mars and Sagittarius. Mars and Sagittarius is the explorer. This is the ultimate optimistic, adventurous, and freedom-loving leader. You want to explore. You want to have fun. It's going to work out. Sagittarius is a Jupiter-ruled sign, so you are going to have a sense of joviality to you. You are going to have a sense of happiness and optimism and positivity for the future. You lead with big picture vision and enthusiasm. You lead with the big picture enthusiasm, but not necessarily the same enthusiasm as a Mars and Leo. Mars and Leo is enthusiastic and they want to bring people with them on that journey and force them to see the vision. You've already created the vision. Mars and Sagittarius, you have already created that vision. You just enthusiastically present it to other people. Your enthusiasm is infectious. You have an incredible sense of humor and you tend to think very positively about mistakes. You're the leader that thinks of every mistake as a learning opportunity. Every mistake is an opportunity to grow. That is a Mars and Sagittarius leader. So it's a fire planet and it's a fire sign. So you do have an extremely high amount of energy. You will also be thinking globally. Along with a big picture vision for your company, your business, or your team, you will also have a global vision because Sagittarius is definitely a sign that represents global. It represents the community as a whole and experiences. What can I gain from other cultures? What can I gain from other places? What can I gain from experiences out in the wild? So you inspire through bold ideas and open-minded leadership. You are incredibly open-minded, and you are so open and welcoming to other people's ideas. You're a mutable fire sign, so you have that inner drive and passion, but you also are willing to share that. And you're also willing to take other people on that journey and allow them to have input. You are incredibly open-minded. Your challenge is that sometimes you are overly idealistic, and you sometimes are not about the practicality of things. You have a big vision, but sometimes you don't have the practical breaking it down step by step. You don't have a path to get there. You're just like, this is the vision, but there's no map. So sometimes you can be so overly idealistic that there is a treasure. You don't find a map. You don't make a map. You don't plan. You need a planner. But that is one of your biggest challenges. Your global perspective is amazing. You have an amazing vision and you have an amazing optimism, but you don't have some of the practical details. So you need people around you, and you need to foster a team that gives you the practical details, that gives you that grounding. Fixed signs around you are going to be really good. And also a combination, well, actually, I think a combination of like fixed signs and other mutable signs would be a good combination for you. You need the fixed sign to ground you, but you also need the mutable signs like a Gemini or a Virgo to enact the plan and to create the map that will get you to that big picture. Here's another one of my favorites. Mars in Capricorn. Mars in Capricorn is the executive. That is the executive leadership style. They are straight up, hardcore, in the boardroom executives. Ambitious, totally disciplined, and goal-oriented. If there is anyone who is more controlling than a Scorpio and more micromanaging than a Virgo, it would be a Mars and Capricorn leader. Mars and Capricorn leaders are powerhouses, absolute powerhouses. Their ability to have a vision and create the goals to get to that vision is unparalleled. They are masters of planning and long-term achievement. So you take the long-term prognostication of a Taurus and you add that onto the ambition and ability to plan of a Capricorn. And you have the biggest strength known to man as a leader. Structured leadership that builds sustainable success and also authority. You establish yourself as an authority in your chosen field, and you create a plan that ensures you sustainable success. Remember, Capricorn traditionally rules the 10th house. Career is where it's at. Outward public projection, legacy is where it's at. Sustainability is where it's at. They have the staying power to get to the top of the mountain, and they have the staying power to not be moved off the mountain either. Their ability to plan takes into account any pitfalls. One of the only challenges is that they can be overly rigid and overly focused on the bottom line, lacking flexibility and adaptability. You need to be an adaptable leader. In any sort of leadership style, you need some degree of adaptability. Capricorns rule with an iron fist. It's why they're the sea goat who climbs to the top of the proverbial mountain. They are literally the epitome of what a leader and a manager should be. But that sometimes can be their downfall because they are so rigid in their thought process that they don't see other points of view. And that sometimes is where their plan has a flaw. Moving on to Mars and Aquarius. Mars and Aquarius is the innovator. They are progressive, unconventional, and future focused. So these are your techies. Your Mars and Aquarius people are your techies. They are future focused and they excel at breaking the mold and leading with innovation. This is technology. This is you know what, technology. We're just going to throw it out there. This is Silicon Valley right here. Silicon Valley has the markings of Mars and Aquarius leadership because that is the revolution. They are always seeking to make themselves better. They are always seeking to innovate. They are always seeking the new. They're always seeking something that hasn't been done before. They are masters at creative problem solving. Their strength is visionary leadership that embraces change and new technologies. A lot of the other signs won't. A lot of the other signs, like a Mars and Capricorn, may not embrace technologies. Now, Aquarius, which is traditionally ruled by Saturn in ancient astrology and Uranus in modern astrology, is all about technology. It is all about how we can make that better. How can we restructure it? How can we break the mold? And that is strong suit. They are unmatched, unparalleled at using technology. It would not surprise me if many of the leaders who have created AI and all of these new computer programs and coding and all that stuff that's coming out, would not surprise me if a lot of them don't have a Mars and Aquarius or strong Aquarian signatures, because that is innovation at its finest. You've created innovation that learns. You've created innovation that, pretty much has a pulse. The one challenge is that you can be overly rebellious and you can be detached from what the actual needs are. The problem with technology and the problem with taking the soul out of it, not saying, okay, so I know taking the soul out of it is kind of taking the soul out of it is like, taking like the life, not the intrinsic like spiritual soul, but the life, the pulse, the vibe, the human. Taking the human out of it sometimes is the problem, because the human is going to be known to maintain at least some form of traditional structure. Where you are so concerned about breaking the mold, Mars and Aquarius, you actively break the mold. So you're breaking your structure before you even get a chance to stand on it. That can sometimes be one of the biggest challenges for you. And that's something that you will continuously focus on. And that's something that you will probably surround yourself and foster connections with people. Aquarius is also one of those other global signs because it's the sign where we get to the top of the mountain of achievement in our life and we now survey things from the sky. We now survey things from a very broad global perspective. It's where we stop thinking about ourselves and start thinking about the global society. So that is one of those signs that can look at the big picture, but sometimes they're so actively involved in destroying that foundation, creating a new one. It can create a structure that kind of dystopian. So you create an incredibly edgy dystopian structure that may not be sustainable. And that's sometimes where you lack the foresight because you just want something new. I'm just going to make something new. I'm just going to make something new. But sometimes you need a traditional structure to build off of. And so that is a challenge for you as a leader. Now, finally, Mars in Pisces. Mars in Pisces. So dreamy. Mars in Pisces is the dreamer. They are incredibly intuitive. they're compassionate, and they're overly idealistic. Mars in Pisces can also be another lazy Mars. Pisces is traditionally ruled by Jupiter. Modern rulership is Neptune. Neptune's not very fast to move. Not at all. Neptune is dreamy. It goes with the flow. It just loves to be compassionate and have empathy and connect and create illusion and, be an artistic representation of life, but not necessarily life itself. So sometimes a Mars and Pisces leader can be overly idealistic and can be overly intuitive and overly compassionate. You lead with imagination and you have an incredible sense of emotional intelligence. And your strength is for sure empathetic leadership, also servant leadership. Like, you are so empathetic for the bottom. You are so empathetic for those, like the foundation of your pyramid. You are like, you feel for them. And you inspire people through creativity and sensitivity. You are definitely one of the more artistic Marses, and you would do really well in something that dealt with design or marketing or something of that nature. That is definitely where you would excel in leadership because of your creative vision. You would also excel in fashion because you have a creative vision that you want to enact and you want to move forward towards it. You want to make everything beautiful. The challenge is that you can be incredibly indecisive and you can be very easily overwhelmed without clear boundaries. That empathy in business sometimes lacks boundaries. So you allow people to take advantage and you allow people to maybe get a little bit more than they should. Sometimes that lack of clear boundaries can also mean lack of a structure. There's a reason why they call it a starving artist. That term is because artists flit from one thing to the next, and as the wind blows, they just go with the flow. Mars in Pisces is an artist, goes with the flow, doesn't have boundaries, is easily influenced, sometimes does not make the strongest or the most decisive, planned out, actionable, and sustainable leader. So that's definitely one thing that they have to watch out for. Otherwise, Mars in Pisces, I think, is really great. I think empathetic leadership is something that we all should strive to have some degree of empathy for those we work with. And, for those, I definitely feel like more empathy needs to be popped into some people and less empathy from like a Mars in Pisces or a Mars in Cancer could do with a little bit less empathy, because these are definitely, like Mars in Pisces is like an artist or a monk. They're a spiritual warrior. So if you work in a spiritual field, that's great. If you have a spiritual store, you would probably do really well owning a spiritual store because you're connecting with the community. You're connecting with love and with intuition and with people who share the same ideals as you. You probably would not thrive in a corporate environment. You could do it, but you probably wouldn't thrive in it. So it's about leveraging your strengths, and it's about knowing what direction to go in, leaning into the positive aspects and negating or minimizing the negative challenges. Or at least having people around you that minimize those challenges. Building a team and fostering a team that balances you out. Water and earth and fire. There needs to be that balance of the people around you, balance in your team in order to ground you, inspire you, motivate you, and also present you with different perspectives. You need that when you foster a good team. You can harness the power of Mars and Mars energy for productivity and leadership by leaning into the strengths of your own personal Mars and also paying attention to Mars transits. You can use a Mars transit as a time management tool. I know. It sounds funny, doesn't it? But paying attention or consulting with your local astrologer, paying attention to when Mars is making a really clear, definitive, positive, and supportive aspect, like a trine or a sextile to your ascendant, is generally when you want to put the extra hours in. Or if it's making a trine or a sextile to your sun, you're going to have the excess energy. Or Mars in conjunction with Jupiter, you're going to have the excess energy. Mars in conjunction with itself, you're going to be full of energy. So those are the times when you want to put the most amount of work into what you're doing and focusing on the project at hand. Now, you can also use a Mars square as a way to challenge you to meet your deadlines. Now, remember, a square 90-degree angle is going to be a very challenging aspect because it's tension. It's two planets fighting. But who doesn't love a good fight? I know Mars does. Mars loves a good fight. So if you utilize squares to your ascendant, squares to your 6th house day-to-day routine, squares to your 10th house, or squares to your 2nd house, notice when those are and see if deadlines coincide with those squares. And that is a challenge to finish on time. So that sometimes is a way to look at how you can use Mars for time management. And you can really also look at what Mars is doing in your chart. Like if you have Mars conjunct Jupiter, sometimes you are overly optimistic with things, or sometimes small problems can become big problems. So you need to be able to look in advance and break things down and not look at the big picture. Those are times where you just look at the minute details so that you continuously work along until you get to the end. Mars in Virgo conjunct Jupiter is very much like that. You can't look at the big picture. The big picture will overwhelm you. All you can look at is the goal or the task that you have created, right? The goal or the task that you have broken down in front of you is what you're going to be working on. And that's a way. You need to lean into that strength, and you need to step back from the weakness. So, and you also need to know your Mars in order to know where you're going to draw the line in the sand. Because this is, in leadership, right? Leadership is all about fighting for your place. That is leadership. You are leading a team to fight for your place. You are expanding your empire. If you break it down, that's pretty much what it is. But how do you do it with a strong Mars placement without aggression? Because fighting for what you believe in and having diplomacy does not need to be aggressive. But what Mars does is give you that tool to know this is my defensive line. I will have to go on the offense by being defensive and holding my ground. So look at where Mars is in your chart and also what sign it's in, because your leadership style is very much so closely related to what you will draw your line in the sand for. Establishing clear, cohesive, and impenetrable boundaries help you in business immensely. They not only help you with your relationship with your team, but they also help you maintain boundaries if you work in a service-based or a client-based industry. So leaning into that Mars, you will be able to draw your line in the sand and respectfully stay on your side of that line. That's diplomacy. I'm staying here. And you can also use that to compromise without compromising your values. Now, some of the Mars signs, right, like a Mars in Pisces, may compromise their values. Mars in Libra may compromise their values. Most of the other Mars signs will not compromise their values. You can compromise, and you can go back and forth with your plan of compromising small details in your plan, but always knowing what you want that plan to be and always having that clear, definitive boundary. That will help you use the assertive qualities in Mars for diplomacy, and will also help you effectively communicate and lead. So with your Mars, you also have a built-in sense of motivation. And so when times get tough, you can rely on that Mars to get you through with resilience and through setbacks and challenges. And you need to develop a proactive mindset by aligning with your Mars's energy. Now, we're talking specifically about your natal chart today, but a lot of times I will refer to a business chart. We are going to talk about that in episodes down the road, but your chart, your business itself, has a natal chart. When that business was birthed, when life was breathed into it, you created a natal chart. So all those planetary energies combined to form your business. So in your natal chart, you want to align with your Mars energy for leadership or for working, because it also determines like your drive and how you work and how you're, moving forward and how you progress in the world, your level of ambition. That's oftentimes determined by your Mars. But your business itself has its own Mars energy. So as a business owner or an entrepreneur, using both your Mars and your business's Mars, it's kind of that double dose of what you're aligning with. How is your business living out that Mars energy? How are you as a leader influencing that Mars energy by transit? So you can look at the synastry between you as a leader and your role in your business. Fascinating stuff. We are going to dive into it. It's going to be great. So we are also going to talk about what happens when Mars decides to stop and go back. As we said earlier, all planets retrograde. Mars is no exception. Mars retrogrades for a decent amount of time. Retrogrades for a period of up to 88, 89 days. And will retrograde once every 2 years. So 2 years ago, Mars went retrograde. And now Mars is going retrograde in the beginning of Leo and is going to be marching back into Cancer. Now that is on officially December 6th on this part of the globe, and I am in the Northern Hemisphere. December 6th of 2024 to February 25th of 2025 is going to be your Mars retrograde. It's a period of about 88 days where your get up and go leaps, your drive, your ambition goes internal and becomes frustration. So we're going to talk about Mars retrograde in Cancer on a global level. The retrograde energy in Cancer on a global level, we are going to see probably a little bit of a drop in the market for Q1. And we are going to see also dropping in the housing market as well. You're going to expect to see that bounce back up as soon as the retrograde is over. But it is going to have an effect. Retrograde energy is where that forward momentum gets pulled back. Ancient astrologers equate retrograde as being under the influence of Saturn, the greater malefic. So it means that your outward movement is restricted. And so in the terms of business, Mars, which is your commodity, the commodity is restricted. The sales are not happening. You will also see that with Mercury retrogrades, as Mercury is also a planet that deals a lot with commerce. You'll see things dip during that time. This is not a time to have emotional decision making, because you'll probably freak out and you'll probably look at things going down and you're going to be like, oh my God, I need to sell. I need to just sell it all. It's going down. I'm going to lose everything. A lot of people do a lot of fear-based things when Mars goes retrograde because there is a very noticeable effect for a longer period of time. It's not the 21 days that a Mercury retrograde is. 88 days is actually a pretty significant chunk of time. We don't think of it as being that long, but it's a chunk of change. It is definitely a chunk of time. You will feel it. Your winter will definitely be dragging along. And so what you have to do is make productive use of that time. This is not a time, starting in December, it's not going to be a time for you to make outward movement, progression, and this is not when you want to launch a new product. This is not when you want to launch your latest commodity. So, Mars in Cancer is all about emotional drive, protective instincts, and personal security. So this is not the time where you want to go and look for a house or go and buy a house, because Mars in Cancer is going to make that very difficult for you. Your sense of security is, you have to maintain the security you have and not seek security elsewhere. So the unique qualities for Mars in Cancer and how it's going to affect us in business is it is going to lead to a lot of emotional decision making and resistance to change. It's a cardinal sign. It wants to move forward. And so it is going to drive us a little bit off balance and make us, not really focus on what's important. We're going to want to move with our emotions, and we're going to have a big sense of frustration when that doesn't pan out. So when you look at a Mars retrograde in business, this is your time to strategize. This is your time to go internal, and this is your time to bring it to the team. So the ideas that you have and the projects that you want to do, you write them out, you make the plan, you do whatever is necessary to create the plan for when Mars goes direct. So when Mars goes direct on February 25th, you want to plan your launches for March 1st. March 1st, 2025, you want to plan those launches because Mars is going to be direct and it's going to be out of that station, right? The station on December 6th and February 25th is when Mars stops. So you do not want to wait and do things on those days. You want to wait until Mars actually has movement. So if for next year you are planning things, you want to slow down, reassess your goals, and avoid the emotional decision making. Starting at around November, you want to start taking those ideas and you want to start planning those for spring. You want to start reassessing your goals, going over your business plan is a really good thing to do during this time. And also research during this time is going to be highlighted. And then you want to plan your launches for March 1st, because March 1st is going to be about the time that Mars is in at least a decent enough forward motion. It is out of that stationary period and it's moving forward. So you want to avoid impulsive decisions. You're going to want to make them. Yes, you are. Those emotions are going to be high. It doesn't matter because that Mars is going to aspect you in one way, shape, or form. So you are going to get that urge to emotionally and impulsively make decisions. Use this time as a reflection, rest, and recalibrating time for not only your business strategies, but also yourself. Mars's impact as it retrogrades in Cancer, you are going to rely on your team a little bit more. You are going to rely on your team to mellow you out when you're overly emotional. You're going to rely on your team for managing emotional conflicts, and you're going to focus a lot on fostering relationships during that time. So this is the time where you are going to want to foster those relationships with your team. And this is when any conflict that has arisen or is arising or going to arise during that retrograde period, you are going to want to spend that retrograde period managing and ironing out emotional conflicts and misunderstandings. This is time to find clarity, connect, and re-hug your team. So as a leader, you are going to want to just reconnect, refocus, and really smooth out any misunderstandings or conflicts. And chances are, I would say, starting in the beginning part of November, when Mars goes into that shadow period, you are going to see some conflicts arise. Because as Mars slows down, you're going to see frustration taking kind of a, kicking it up. Because all that drive and outward, I'm going to move outward, because Mars, as we said before, Mars wants to go forward. Mars does not wait for things to be brought to it. Mars goes out and gets it. This is a time where Mars needs to focus on the other part of leadership and being a warrior, which is strategy. So this is your time to foster those relationships, connect with people, connect with those partnerships, foster relationships. That's what this is going to be about. Your team dynamic should be the leader taking the role of the servant leader and fostering open communication, being empathetic, and addressing concerns. So during this time, you are going to want to have moments of reflection. I know, it sounds so lame. I know. And you're like, what in the woo are you talking about? I give people a little bit of woo because it works. The woo in this retrograde period that's coming up is going to be moments of reflection and journaling. You are going to want to journal your frustrations, your plans, all that stuff out, because that will help you cultivate emotional intelligence, because you are going to see your innermost drives projected onto that paper. Your frustrations are going to be projected out in front of you. That is getting in touch with your inner self and developing and cultivating and nurturing emotional intelligence. Because that's what Mars in Cancer is about. It's about protecting yourself, and it's about emotional. It's like, Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon is the ultimate nurturer because it represents our mother. We need to get in touch with that self. We need to get in touch with that side of ourself, which can sometimes be a little bit difficult for Mars in Virgo, Mars in Capricorn, Mars in Gemini, Mars in Aries. We need to cultivate the emotional intelligence to make it through the retrograde period. Well, that was a lot. That was definitely a lot. So, when it comes down to it, Mars is one of those planets, especially if you are a business owner, manager, or leader, that you want to get to know. You want to understand and fully lean into that power. Because Mars's power and motivation, drive, leadership, plus the impact that it has on you business-wise, and also the impact of that upcoming Mars retrograde, journal it out for a way to connect with your innermost, your highest self. Because when you're writing, sometimes you're more comfortable writing something than you are saying it. Sometimes you're more comfortable writing something than you are telling it to a therapist. So sometimes you need to align with that inner Mars warrior energy by writing it out, by journaling, by doing some journaling prompts, some self-reflection, and even some gratitude journals. Because that is going to be what pushes you in your business and pushes you for your business success. Isn't that fun? Well, we are going to be coming back with an episode on the money houses. And I am definitely not done talking about Mars retrograde. So you will definitely hear more about that as it gets closer. So I want to thank all you guys for tuning in. My name is Brett. You can find my contact information in the show notes below. So if you guys liked what you heard, definitely like, share, subscribe, leave me a review. And if you have a question or have something like in your chart, like, hey, Brett, I have Mars in Pisces. What am I going to do? feel free to email those questions to me, and I will make a whole show out of answering them. You can email me at brett@oraclebrett.com. You will see that at the end of this video, and you'll also see that email address and all the deets down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next time.